Good morning. We are live this Tuesday morning. I'm so excited to share with you this morning. We are going to discuss a story of hope, which I have just stolen, and our guest will explain that. But our guest this morning is Ann Coleman, and she's going to share her family story with us. But before she does that, I want to remind you that we are live on Tuesday morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. If you're catching us now, please feel free to dialogue with our guests. You can put questions and comments in the comment section of this broadcast. If you're catching a replay, you can comment and dialogue with other people catching the replay, but Ms. Coleman will not be there to dialogue with you. Couple of things. We were a little bit late because I'm having tech issues. I'm always having tech issues and tech people come in, but we're going to get it straight. So be patient with us. And if you notice something, put that in the comments too, because I'll fix it on the spot if I can. And the amazing Jessica is taking a vacation this week. So she will not be behind the scenes putting up comments and links. I will be doing that. So when you see my eyes darting all over the place, you'll know that's why I'm doing that. So I'll be looking for your comments. I'll be putting up my own comments. I'll be a little scattered, but I know that you're going to be patient with me. And if you notice anything, just put in the comments and we'll get through it together. We're so used to having Jessica with us. Now, having said that, I want to introduce you to Ann Coleman. She is founder of Neurogility. Did I say it right?
Neurogility.
Neurogility and the podcast Speaking of Teens. And she's here to share her story of getting help for her son who was struggling with mental health and substance issues. And she has a lot to teach us. Most importantly, what she's going to share with us is that our families are similar. And if your family is having a similar struggle, you are not alone. And there is a way forward. There is hope. And she's going to share her story of hope. Good morning, Ann.
Good morning. And actually, I'd love to say that if anyone does, before I forget, if anyone does want to reach out to me, my phone number is on the website at the bottom of the screen. And I invite anyone who wants to chat with me to reach out because I've been there and I know what it's like to be a mom and maybe have a child struggling. So I'm always happy to talk to someone.
Wonderful. I'm going to put your website up now. And while I'm doing that, please tell us a bit about yourself and your work.
Okay. Well, I started out as an attorney. I've been an attorney actually for about 26, 27 years. And, but in the last three and a half years, something like that, I have been limiting my practice so that I can learn more about the adolescent brain and parenting adolescents and emotions and emotion coaching and emotional intelligence so that I can help other moms. And that was all spurred on by the fact that we had such a rough time with our teenage son a few years ago. And so I'm going to tell you that story today. But so I do healthcare law, about a handful of clients that I still keep. And I get a little irritated when they call me because I really like doing the other stuff better. So that's where I am right now.
Okay. Well, let's jump right in and please share your family story with us. And remember, if you have any questions or comments, just please put them in the comment section.
Okay. Well, my son is now 21 years old and we adopted him at birth. We were at the hospital when he was born. He came home with us. One thing that we did not know, and we kept in close contact with the birth mother during her pregnancy, but we did not realize until we took him home the day that we took him home from the hospital that she had actually smoked marijuana in her third trimester with him. So I don't know if anyone out there has ever gotten this, but we got the whole drug baby speech at the hospital, which was rough to hear. And I was in complete denial of that for about 18 years. But he came home from the hospital anxious. And I mean, he screamed at me when I took the bottle out of his mouth. He cried all night for months on end. So, and that just kept on going. He was a very strong-willed, as they say, or intense child. He would have temper tantrums a lot. I mean, really, there are lots of kids that do that. So I still didn't associate that with, oh, well, that's because the birth mother smoked marijuana. But he was always hard to transition. He had issues about his shoes being too tight or being too loose or the seams on the toes. I had to buy certain socks. There was always something. He was not easy. So when he was little, I read all the books about strong-willed children. I think that's a Rob Greene book, and how to, put things in buckets, 1, 2, and 3, and what's important and what's not important. And so then, as he started in preschool and kindergarten, we realized that he probably had anxiety. He would say, "I don't feel good. I don't feel good. Why, honey? What's wrong? Tummy, throat, tummy, throat." And well, that was when he was really little. And we couldn't figure out. Well, finally, a friend said, maybe it's in his chest. Maybe he's feeling anxious. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's probably it. But we didn't
Mhm.
realize that that was kind of back there all the time. It would just come out every once in a while. And when he was in preschool and then on into kindergarten, first, second, third grade, the teacher started saying, he can't focus. He doesn't start his classwork on time. We can't get him to turn things in. And then from there, it just progressed. Couldn't get homework done. Homework was a battle every single day. He could not stand to do homework. Third grade, we had him tested for ADHD. And sure enough, he had ADHD, but he also had slow processing speed, dyslexia, dysgraphia, all the disses, everything you could have. But his IQ tested superior. So we're like, okay, how are we going to deal with this? So all through elementary school, all the way through eighth grade, it was every book I read was on ADHD, learning disabilities or learning issues, and how to cope with that, how to get accommodations. He was in a small Christian private school. And I don't know if you know this or not, but they don't have to give accommodations. It's all up to them if they want to or they don't want to. So it was always a battle for accommodations. There was always a conference that everybody wanted to have about what are we going to do about parts. He won't turn in his homework. He won't do this. He won't do that. He doesn't talk in class. We're afraid he's zoned out all the time. And his grades were okay. I mean, he made some A's, he made some B's. And then on into, I guess, seventh, eighth grade, middle school, when puberty hit, which that didn't even, dawn on me at the time, but his grades started going more to C's. And then he was like, gearing up towards D's. And at that point in eighth grade, he was going to move up to the upper school, high school. And we went to them and said, look, if we can't do any more accommodating than what we're doing, and here's what we think we need for him, just let us know if that's not going to work out, because we're going to have to move into public school so we can get an IEP, 504s, whatever we needed to do. And they were like, yeah, sorry, he just doesn't fit the mold. So, and we should have taken him out long before that. But every year he got in tighter with his little group of friends and all that. So it's just hard to make that decision to move him out. So, and we did start seeing more anxiety in middle school too. And again, didn't associate that with, going through puberty. But at that point, he was put on an antidepressant, which I fought for a long time, but antidepressants are supposed to help you with anxiety. So I finally said, okay, fine, let's try it and see. So during that time where we were trying those medications, he was also on ADHD medication from the time he was in third grade, which I hated as well. But we were always switching up medications, always switching up the anti-anxiety or the antidepressant, always trying to figure out, was it his anxiety that's working against him? Was it the anxiety from having ADHD? Was it was he depressed? Did he need more ADHD medication because he was zoned out? I mean, why is he zoned out? It was constant. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that. So it was always a medication struggle. When we took him out of that school and moved him into ninth grade to the high school, he knew the kids there. They were from the neighborhood. He played, t-ball and baseball with them, and knew these boys, but they weren't like really good friends. But he did get in with a group of boys from the neighborhood. We carpooled in ninth grade, and ninth grade went well. They were separated from the rest of the high school kids. They didn't have hardly any homework compared to what he was used to. So he was able to do most everything. I was still staying on top of him and doing all the stuff every single day. But it was the end of ninth grade, going into the spring and summer, when a friend of mine, the mother of one of his little best friends, who was still at the private school, but they had remained friends, she called me and said, Ann, I found a video on my son's phone. And I said, oh, yes. It was of my son and her son and a group of boys down the road in the neighborhood smoking weed. They're smoking pot. I call it pot still. But anyway, they were smoking weed. And I get nervous just thinking about it. I cannot even describe the anxiety and the devastation that I felt when I watched that video with her. I cried. I think I cried probably for weeks on end about it. But, and that goes back to the fact that we had discussed, drugs. I mean, till I was blue in the face when he was growing up, and I'm never going to do that, Mom. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to do that. And, what I didn't realize at the time, and I realized much later, was also that what was playing into that devastation was the fact that my brother was actually a drug addict. He became a drug addict when he was very young. I mean, he was probably an addict by the time he was 14 years old. And he started out smoking marijuana. I tried to tell my parents. My parents didn't believe me. He turned to cocaine, I think was his next drug of choice. And he passed away a handful of years ago, was still a drug addict, was on heroin, methamphetamine, everything under the sun. So when I was growing up, when I was an adolescent, my brother was doing drugs. My parents were devastated. There was always a fight. There was always an argument. He was always knocking down a door, punching out a windshield, doing something insane. And I have anxiety too. Don't know if I mentioned that. And ADHD. And so Parks was my child, whether he came out of me or not, he was my child. I knew everything he was feeling, and my anxiety played into this devastation. All this backstory of mine with my brother, I was like, oh my God, he's not going to be like this. Not consciously, wasn't thinking that at the time. I do now realize that that's what I was thinking. So I went berserk. I mean, I dropped the hammer down. It was Life 360, and I'm going to know everywhere you are. And I didn't trust anything he told me. I didn't believe anything he said. I was, you're going to be home at this time. I'm going to watch you go out the door. And it was control, control, control. And maybe not as bad as I'm saying, because I did have my husband, who's kind of more calm voice in my head most of the time. But I started trying to control him. So as he moved into 10th grade, that summer between 9th and 10th grade, he lost his girlfriend. She moved back to Germany. A little girl down the street started liking him. That was the ex-girlfriend of one of his buddies from this new school. All of them got mad at him. They all turned on him and started on social media bullying him. They drove by our house shouting things at him. They shunned him completely. And this was the summer going into 10th grade. He became so depressed that he was suicidal. He was beside himself. He could not function hardly. We were talking to counselors, talking to the psychiatrist, trying to get him, the medication switched up, trying to get him to talk to people. He didn't want to talk to anybody. It was awful. And when school started back for 10th grade, I think that was the time we got him evaluated to see what was going on. It takes forever now to get in to see an adolescent psychologist, but she diagnosed him with major depression and generalized anxiety disorder, which we had kind of known all along. But when he went back to school, all these boys were still shunning him. Had no one to sit with in the lunchroom, which that's not a big deal to an adult, but it's devastating to a high schooler or a middle schooler or an elementary schooler. And so he turned to this fellow that was in his educational support class, which that's the class they go to 1 hour a day to try to get caught up with homework. And it's part of that IEP, getting things done. They've got a teacher that helps them get things done. So he turned to this kid and all hell broke loose. This child's parents they told me they watched him and they, made sure there was nothing going on when my son was over at his house. And that was not the case. I found out later. He started smoking pot even more. They were, now I know, experimenting with ecstasy, with what they call lean, which is some kind of like cough syrup mixed with something. He experimented
Mm.
with, I found out much later, he even tried LSD a couple of times, which if I had known all this then, I would have been completely wigged out. But it was that 10th and on into 11th grade was the worst time of our life. I mean, he was completely out of control at home. He was angry and frustrated and depressed and threatening suicide, but he wanted to hang out with this kid because it was the only kid he had to hang out with. And we kept getting promises that they're okay over here, and all of it kind of floods together now, but it was not okay. And as a matter of fact, again, finding out much later, he was held up at gunpoint a couple of times, mugged. Um, we even suspected at one point that he was selling marijuana. And again, this is all with me staying on top of him and trying to control the situation
Mhm.
and being unable to control it. We were going to a family therapist trying to get help. And again, you can't pick up a kid that's this big and force them to go to a therapist. He would go to the family counselor every now and then, but she would talk mostly to us about how to handle him. Looking back in retrospect, she was telling us probably the wrong thing. But all of this just hit ahead going in then to 11th grade. And he actually got caught, I think it was just a month or so into 11th grade, with marijuana in the bottom of his backpack. He and this other kid snuck out of the school and to do something in the parking lot. And as they were coming back in, they checked their backpacks, and my son had marijuana in there. He was arrested for simple possession. He was put up for expulsion from school. He was made to go through this juvenile diversion program. I mean, it was a whole thing. He had to go to 45 days to an alternative school. That was kind of a good thing because he was separated from this other kid, and that gave me the ability to really try to separate them more because at that point I was realizing more of the things that they were doing. So that after the 45 days, he's supposed to reintegrate to school. He was back like a day or two, and the principal called me, and I can't even remember now what she said, but he was doing something with his phone, or they were going to put him on, um, in-house suspension, or what they call ISS, in-school suspension. And I said, you know what? This is not going to work. I'm bringing him home. He's going to homeschool. I'm going to keep him away from these kids at school. I'm going to keep him, confined in my little hole, and he's not going to do this anymore. So I did. Took him out of school, homeschooled him through 11th grade, forbid anyone from coming to the house. He had like two friends, a girlfriend and another kid that were allowed to come to the house. And little did I know, they were still doing things. They were still sneaking things. It's amazing how creative kids can get when they want to do something behind your back. And I was at home, and my husband was at home. We both work from home. So, go figure. But I think it was at some point, moving into, it would have been fall, where he would have been moving into his senior year, where I was still going to teach him at home. His anger issues and the arguments at home and the disruption at home became so bad, it was getting violent. And we had talked to the psychiatrist and the counselors we were talking to that he refused to talk to. And they said, you know what? We don't know what else we can do. If you can't get him in here to talk to us, and, he's not cooperating, and it's getting worse and worse, his behavior is getting worse and worse, the only thing we know to do to tell you is to put him in residential treatment or hospital, or he needs inpatient help. Now, we were more worried about all the drug use and the trying the drugs and the hanging out with these, people that were getting him mugged, well, he was doing it. But anyway, he was in a bad crowd, and it was just getting worse. I was not so focused on his anxiety and the depression as I was probably that at the time because of my brother and my backstory. And I was terrified he was going to turn out to be a drug addict. And So somewhere in the fall of, I guess it was the fall of 2018, we had some kind of blow up. I walked into his bedroom or something and he got mad about something, can't remember what. He picked up a big wooden mid-century chair that I'd refinished and threw it against the wall over his bed. Plaster falls everywhere. We're in an old house. He picks up his golf bag full of golf clubs, throws them at the wall, and then threw, I think, a controller at us. My husband, by that point, was standing at the door with me at his bedroom door. And we were like, this is it. I mean, this is it. We had previously taken him to the emergency room maybe twice with him saying, I feel like the world's going to end. I don't know what to do. He wasn't saying he was going to kill himself, but he needed help. He was reaching out for help. I didn't know at that time that you really do have to say almost that he is thinking of killing himself or he is thinking about hurting someone else. He's a danger to himself or to others. Didn't know those were the magic words. Well, by this point on this day, I did know those magic words. And in our region, in our town, Greenville, South Carolina, we were told that you have to call the police first, get them to come to your house and tell them you need an ambulance. Your child needs to be taken to the hospital. They are out of control, whatever. And that they are a danger to themselves or others. So that's what we did. My husband, he was in tears. I was in tears. He finally said, look, just call 911. So we walked out the front door because he was raging at us. We walked out the front door, called 911. The police got there. They went in. They spoke with him. We were still outside. The ambulance pulls up. Police come out with him. He was calm. They put him in the ambulance and we go to the hospital. So I don't know if you guys know this or not, but there's a major shortage of psychiatric beds or spots for kids in adolescent psychiatric hospitals or adolescent units, psychiatric units at regular hospitals. And there's a major shortage of clinicians as well. So psychiatric clinicians for adolescents, psychiatrists, psychologists, you just can't get in to see one. They're just not there. And that's why the beds, there's such a shortage in beds because these people have to staff the hospitals. So anyway, he goes to the ER and they tell us when he gets there, look, we've got 3 hospitals in South Carolina. And by this time I already knew that there were only 6 beds available to the entire 10-county upstate of South Carolina. And I'd already called, I think at some point, and talked to them. And they're like, yeah, you'll just have to call back. We don't have any openings. So they said he's going to either be shipped off to Charleston or Columbia. Charleston was 3 hours away. Columbia was an hour and a half away. Please let it at least be Columbia, which that's what they did. They put him in a squad car the next morning because they didn't have an ambulance available. He and another child, and drove them to Columbia. At that point, the psychiatrist and the counselors that we were speaking to were saying, look, you got to take him straight from the hospital to residential treatment. He does not need to come home. He does not need to pass go. He needs to go straight from there to residential. And the thing about the hospital is you think, oh, well, that's finally, we're going to get some help. We're going to get everything straightened out. That's not the answer. The hospital is literally a Band-Aid. It is let's get their medication straight, maybe figure out what's going on with them. Let's stabilize them. And then they release them. It's catch and release. And they are there no more than a handful of days. Parks was there 5 days. And I believe I even had to fight with insurance to get him to stay, to allow them to get him to stay for 5 days that long. So while he was there, they said, yes, he's got anxiety, he has depression. They also said he had PTSD from being mugged and that kind of thing. And while he was there, he had a roommate who, unbeknownst to us, was also homicidal. He tried to kill Parks. He jumped on him, strangled him. Parks passed out. It was a whole deal with the hospital. They wouldn't let us come get him. We couldn't check him out. So we've got this now on top of all the other trauma and the PTSD that he has. He literally passed out from being choked by this kid. So moved the kid out, and they said, nope, he's fine, but he's been committed, so you can't come get him. You can't come get him. So at the end of the 5 days, I did go get him. I had worked my tail off those 5 days trying to figure out where are we going to put him. And if you've never tried this before, try finding a place that takes your insurance, that treats mental health as much as they do substance abuse, because most of the places that you find, their focus is on the substance abuse. Well, Park's substance abuse, in everybody's opinion, was a self-medicating for his anxiety and depression. And now we've got PTSD. So I was trying to find a place that treated both, but that really focused on the mental health. For 5 days, I tried this. I thought I had a place and I didn't. Then I thought I had another place and I didn't. And everything fell through. A friend of mine had her son at Newport Academy out in California. So called them. It looked great. They took our insurance. It was not going to cost us an arm and a leg. They were even going to get him there. Or insurance was going to pay to get him there. So when he came home, we had a 2-week window that they didn't have anything available at Newport, and there was nowhere else for him to go. He was on his best behavior because we had talked about residential treatment, and I was trying to talk him into agreeing to go somewhere. Well, maybe, and I never could get, a commitment. And then the date came up. We got a place for him. You need to get him here. He was not going to go willingly. So this is what the kids call it. We had him gooned there. Somebody came to the house 4:00 in the morning on a Sunday morning, I think it was. And we woke him up, told him we loved him, told him that we had no other choice and that this was for him. And then these 2 men walk in and they tell us to leave. We left, went out back, and they took him to a car and put him on a plane and went with him to Newport in California. That was probably next to having the police called and taken him to the hospital. That was the worst thing I've ever had to do. And it still hurts me. And I'm pretty sure it hurts him. But we had no choice. It was not getting better. It was not going to get better. He was not going to get help for himself. We had to get him help. Got him to Newport. And of course, he was angry at us. And they will, tell you when you put a kid somewhere like this, they're going to be angry at you. They're not going to go, oh, I'm so glad you did this. Thank you so much. I couldn't do it myself. But while he was there for 2 months. He was going to turn 18 December 16th. We put him there. I think that was finally, the beginning of November or so. So 2 months before he was going to turn 16, or maybe it was the end of October. Anyway, it was going to give us about 2 months. We went every other weekend to visit. They worked with us on family therapy over Skype. He seemed to be picking up some of this stuff, although he was not being really kind or nice to us about it. And we didn't know if it was going to help or if it was not going to help. Well, while he was there, he was diagnosed. The psychiatrist who saw him, and this is the one probably bad thing I would say, is that when they are in residential treatment, they do see a psychiatrist. All of the places have that, but it's not a full-blown evaluation like psychologists do when they sit down and go, 2 or 3 hours and they answer all the questions and they go, oh, well, they've got this and this, and this is the issue. I guess psychiatrists who feel like they've seen this enough that they just know, she called me up and said, we think he's bipolar. Okay, well, maybe that is the case. I don't know. So they put him on medications for bipolar. They put him on medications for PTSD. They put him on medication for everything. And I went out and bought the book that the adolescent psychologist had written about bipolar disorder. I just see that it's 10 o'clock. I can't believe I've talked this long already. Okay. But anyway, he come to find out this guy who was world renowned in adolescent bipolar disorder was at UCLA, which was just a drive up from where he was in Orange, California. Long story short, I took him up there, had him evaluated, begged the guy to let me in, called him on the phone. and he was evaluated. He does not have PTSD. So we're still with just anxiety, substance use disorder, because all of his substance use was interfering with his life. And that's how they, decide that substance use disorder. While at right before we left Newport, though, our family counselor, when I could not figure out what he wanted me to do and how he wanted me to talk to my son, he said, just go buy the book, No Drama Discipline by Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. I was like, okay. He said, just read chapter 4. So I bought the book and read it. And that was the first time that everything kind of fit together for me. The issues that I had with my brother, the way I was acting so controlling, my wigging out, emotionally, him wigging out emotionally. The book talks about, well, it doesn't name it specifically, but it really teaches you to emotion coach your children, how we as parents have to rein in our own emotions, how we come to these issues with these things in the back of our head. And that's how we end up parenting. So that was like a light bulb moment.
What's the name of the book again? I'm going to type it in.
It is called No Drama Discipline, and it's by Siegel and Bryson, Siegel and Bryson. Dan Siegel is world renowned. He has written oodles of books. Whole Brain Child is one. Now, this book was about raising, it talks about toddlers, okay? But our counselor was smart enough to know that that's where I kind of needed to start, because I just couldn't get, he was saying, acknowledge his feelings. Let him know you understand what he feels, but you still need to set boundaries. And I'm like, I don't know what you're telling me to do. So that book opened a new world. By the time Parks came home then, and we moved from South Carolina to Alabama so that he would not go back to his friends in South Carolina, we literally moved to my mother's house in Alabama. She was falling. She was 85. She was having trouble. Anyways, we thought, you know what? We'll just go stay with her. We'll get him out of that environment. We'll see how long this takes to get him all great. And then, we'll just figure it out as we go. So, and we're still here. But when I came home, that book opened up this world. I started researching everything I could get my hands on, everything about the adolescent brain, about emotions, like I said at the beginning. So I started, and my husband did, we started communicating with him differently. We started acknowledging his feelings. We started listening and letting him, guide the way. I got control over my fear that he was going to turn into a drug addict. I got control over my own emotions. And 3 years later, he is living in Colorado independently, snowboarding, teaching snowboarding at the Woodward Training Center at Copper Mountain. He has 3 roommates. He's doing great. His anxiety still acts up every once in a while, but we have a loving relationship. It is absolutely amazing. If you had told me 3 years ago that I would be here right now, where I would not be daily concerned about my son, I would say, oh, it's just never going to happen. He still smokes weed every now and then. I am not going to lie. He may smoke it every day. I don't know. But he is stable, has a job, is loving life, is happy. He's not going to college. He broke that to us about 3 years ago. Took me a couple of years of grieving to get over that. But you know what? He's alive, and he's happy, and he's not depressed, and he's doing just fine. And to me, that's what matters.
Can you speak to you when we did our pregame? You talked about this, and I find this important for other families who are going through this. When you, your story is wonderful, and thank you for sharing it, and thanks Parks for allowing you to do this, because it's his story. Exactly. But can you talk a little bit about, as the parent, grieving those traditional milestones or expectations, because that's something we don't discuss. We discuss, helping our children get through whatever it is that we're hoping that they can see the other side of. But there's something for us, right? Because we're presented with this child and we have expectations. We know the traditional milestones, and you're grieving missing some of those. Can you talk to that?
Yes, I did. Actually, I probably started out grieving when, figured out I could not get pregnant, then adopted, then, drugs use by the birth mother. It was great. It was almost a constant grieving process when I saw that he was not exactly like other kids. And He, other people would look at me cross-eyed when he, fall out at the baseball game when he was, 4 years old and couldn't get up because he was so distraught. It was a constant grieving process. And yes, this, that final milestone, I guess, of going to college, that was something that I had still not lost hope for. And we had always talked about it. He'd always said he wanted to go to college. And in the back of my mind, I knew that was not going to work out for him, because I knew with his predisposition for drug use, and he doesn't drink, but I was afraid, now looking back, I know that college would not have been a good idea. He would have gone off the rails in college. His learning issues, that was a grieving process. Being told he was ADHD, even though we thought he probably was, being told that he was devastating. Being told that he needed to put on medication, again, devastating. Having to take him out of the school that he had been in for 9 years by that point, and putting him somewhere else, devastating. It was all of those were milestones for me to realize that, what, nope, not this one either. And you got to move on, and you got to deal with what you've been dealt. And we did. And, this final one was college. And I still mention him every now and then. You might want to take some classes on the side, or just see, because your anxiety is better now. But I've come to realize, like I said, that having him alive, having him not be a drug addict, and not be on a street corner, and not be, daily thinking about harming himself, that to me is enough. And I'm trying to let that, I'm working on that, trying to let that be enough. And if he works for, snowboarding place for the rest of his life, and he's happy with it, then I'm just going to be happy with it.
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
That answers my question. And that is the most important part, right? If he's happy with it and productive, then we need to be happy with it, because in the end, it's their lives.
Well, exactly. And that's and I'll just say, I'm sorry. I did actually a podcast recently about this, about people, about how kids are so stressed out and under so much pressure these days to achieve academically and get in the right college, or a college, or whatever it is. These kids, they did a study recently and compared them with kids who are living in extreme poverty, and the kids who are under pressure to achieve in the high achieving schools, their mental health was worse than the kids living in extreme poverty. So it's, the pressure that we do put on our kids, and I'll admit, that was there for me too. It can be devastating to them. And, life's not all about making tons of money and having a big house and having a nice car. It just isn't. It's about, after you get all these things, then you figure out, what, am I really happy? What do I need to do for myself here? My son is living his dream. He loves snowboarding. This is what he wants to do. He may get a sponsor, and he will live his dream. And when he figures out that's not what he wants, then he'll change his mind and do something else maybe. But for right now, we're happy with it.
Can you tell us a little bit about his experience at Newport Academy? We heard the story of how he arrived there, and
Right.
a little. But what do they do there? What was it like?
Well, interestingly, he was so mad at us the whole time he was there. Furious. But when he got back and we brought him back to Alabama, it was, at Newport we did this, and at Newport we did that, and oh yeah, this guy from Newport, and oh, we cooked this kind of food at Newport. He never said a negative thing about it, which was so interesting, because it was so horrible when he was there. They do this to us, and they make us do this. So he went to counseling every day. He had an individual therapist. He had a group therapy. They had group therapy every day. I want to say even several times a day. They had the psychiatrist, who, although that one, misdiagnosis, which just tells you need to stay on top of things and, don't believe everything you hear. But, that was one bad thing. But they were awesome. We had a family counselor. And like I said, he had his own individual therapist. He really liked her. They did, all kinds of, they called it experiential therapy, where they take them out and they do, they ride the horses, and they take care of horses, or they go do the ropes course, and they always have like this lesson involved in it where, it's teaching you team building, or to believe in yourself and that kind of thing. And again, at the time when he was going through it, he wasn't calling home and going, "Oh, I just love this. This is doing me so much good." But other than the fact that we started communicating with him differently, and I think that was a huge part of it as well, but it was Newport for almost 2 months, or right at 2 months, and then us talking to him differently, and then, him, I think, maturing, his brain maturing. All of that combined is what got us where we are today. And I know it wouldn't have happened if he hadn't gone to Newport. I mean, there was nothing we could do. That he had to have that serious jerk of getting him out of the environment that he was in. And I think that was as important as anything else. I think, if you can't afford residential treatment, maybe you can go to grandma's house and stay for a few months. I mean, I think just getting him out of that environment, plus the counseling, that was a big deal. And not bringing him back and going right back to the same people. That I think was a big deal too. But Newport was wonderful.
If you think this sounds like something that your family may want to pursue, I've put the link in the comment section, so feel free to access the link there. I've also put several links that Anne has provided from her website. So why don't you speak to that? Tell us a little bit about the work. You told us that you're an attorney,
right.
but you've since you're transitioning into other work, having had because of this experience. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, as like I said, as soon as I read this book, I was like, oh my God. I mean, other moms have got to understand this. I know there are other moms out there like me who don't get this. And so I decided, almost immediately that I was going to start helping. At first I wanted to teach adolescents, and I did there for a little while. And then I thought, you know what? It's the parents that really need to understand their own emotions and how that plays into their kids' behavior. So I started concentrating on that, started studying that. I started a website, neuragility.com. I do the podcast, Speaking of Teens, and I put out a lot of information in the form of ebooks and guides through the website, through my Instagram at neuragility, to help parents understand what it is that I learned, and which makes all the difference in the world. It's all about emotional intelligence. My son had none, I had none. And when you don't, your emotions take over, your emotions control you. And that's what you can't let happen. So I'm working on a parenting program. I'm working on putting all this together into a program. I've piloted it a couple of times now. I want to get it, near perfect. And then I'm going to put that out there. And I plan on having it at a very affordable price. And even if somebody can't afford it, if they will contact me, I will work something out with them, because I feel like this is so important for parents to understand that it is not about obedience and control and jerking the phone out of their hand and taking things away and punishment. It's about respect and listening and keeping a close relationship with your kid above all else. Because if you don't have that relationship and that connection with them, then they are going to go underground with their behavior. They're going to just get to be really good liars and really good at hiding things from you. And that's not what you want. You want open communication. You want to be able to not freak out when they tell you something, so that they'll come back and tell you the next thing. I preach this and preach it and preach it. Listen to them. Don't immediately fly off the handle and start issuing punishments. Put yourself in their shoes. Empathy is huge. You can find so much information in those free ebooks and guides that I put out. I try to put my heart and soul in there. And again, my phone number, I think, is on most all of them, is on the website. I tell people all the time, if you need me, reach out to me. I will talk to you. I will give you advice, even though I'm not a mental health professional. I will do the best I can to at least guide you in the right direction. There's so much to this stuff. And if your child does need help, I think that's the episode maybe coming. No, it just came out last week about getting your child help, the help that we had to get, the higher level of care. So, but if you need anything, feel free to reach out.
Thank you for that. That is a very generous offer. The podcast link is in the comment section in addition to the website link. So look for those. If you're looking for help or want to get in contact with Ann, please. Oh, I have a comment that I'm going to read for you. And also you made a comment about if your kids come to you with the hard stuff, don't freak out. Or sometimes people like me who are very excitable, we're going to freak out. So I always preference it with, I want to talk to you about this. Thank you for telling me about this. This is important. Give me a moment. And I don't go anywhere. I'm like, we'll sit here for a moment while I let it sit in, and then we're going to do all the things we have to do. And that lets them know they're heard, but also lets them know that you are human.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a comment from Jessica, which we'll put up. It says, thank you for courageous and confidently talking about this and sharing your story. There's so much stigma with mental illness, unfair judgment, and often a lot of blame towards parents who are trying so hard to help their struggling teen. Indeed, there is a grieving process and there are tough experiences to walk through. Your well-spoken outreach is a positive resource for other families walking through similar challenges. I couldn't agree more, Jessica.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. Well, you've made us feel good because we've heard your story and we know that there is hope on the other side. I know where to go if I'm ever brave enough for snowboarding lessons.
Yeah, exactly. Not me.
Thank you so much. Again, thanks to your whole family for sharing this story because it is all of your story. And I want to remind everybody that you can return tomorrow, Wednesday, same place, same time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, where we'll have coffee with Jen and Sharon, and they will be sharing something from their history and families. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing more of and hearing more of your podcast. And I look forward to talking to everybody else next week. Bye. And I almost forgot. I am going to put, you mentioned some books and stuff. I'm going to put those links in the comment section when we're done, since we don't have the amazing Jessica and I can only do so many things at once, unlike Jessica. So I'm going to put those in as soon as the broadcast is over in case people are looking for those. Bye.